So when we talk of retinoblastoma, apart from saving vision and saving eye, another thing that comes to our mind is saving the lives of these children. Retinoblastoma, as you all know, is the most common primary intraocular malignancy which is seen in children, and the worldwide incidence is about 1 in 15,000 to 18,000 live births. Now, most cases are diagnosed before the age of 5 years, but the good news is that it is curable if detected early. Now, how many cases of retinoblastoma are reported? Well, if you look at the worldwide incidence, every year it is estimated that globally around 7,200 new cases of retinoblastoma are seen every year, and Asia accounts for more than half of these children, which is approximately 4,000 new children every year. Now, coming to specifically the mortality caused by retinoblastoma, worldwide we have about 3,000 deaths per year due to retinoblastoma, and of these Asia alone accounts for about 1,600 cases every year. Now, the number may not appear that large, but the fact that we need to understand and recognize here is that India has the highest number of retinoblastoma cases in the world. Symptoms can be varied. Of course, leukocoria is the most common presenting symptom, but sometimes children may present with a crossed eye, a red eye, a shrunken globe mimicking phthisis bulbi, or with an orbital mass because of extraocular spread. When we suspect retinoblastoma in a child, very often we have to do an examination under anesthesia because children this age are often uncooperative for complete detailed examination. So when we examine the child under anesthesia, we should not ignore any findings in the anterior segment, do a proper funding with pupillary dilatation by indirect ophthalmoscopy. This is of course not possible in cases with advanced retinoblastoma, but we must remember to examine both eyes because the disease can be bilateral in 1/3 cases and is often asymmetric. We measure the intraocular pressure and then the corneal diameter, and these children have at initial presentation. Family history may be positive in 10% cases. These were twins that came to us from the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Both children had bilateral retinoblastoma and a germline mutation. RETCAM digital imaging is a very useful tool that we have in our hands today because if the fundus is visible, it very nicely documents the tumors. Over here you can see in the picture, 3 tumors can be seen, one covering the macula and 2 smaller tumors away from it. So RETCAM not only helps in the initial diagnosis and staging, but also in assessing the response of tumor to chemotherapy and to laser therapy. Now, the classification system that we have for retinoblastoma has been proposed by Lynn Murphy, and according to this international classification of retinoblastoma, intraocular tumors are classified depending upon their severity from group A to group E. So, group A tumors are small tumors, intraretinal tumors that are away from the disc macula, and they have the best prognosis. Group B tumors are larger than Group A. They may be involving the posterior pole and the macula, but they are not associated with any vitreous or subretinal seeding. Group C are more advanced than Group B in the sense that there is localized vitreous or subretinal seeding, and they have a slightly worse prognosis than Group A and Group B tumors. Group D are the more advanced intraocular tumors where the vitreous or subretinal seeding becomes diffuse and sometimes very difficult and challenging to treat. And finally, we have the most advanced form of Group E tumor, which is where there is no salvageable vision, and most of the times these children are treated by a primary enucleation. So if the tumor is touching the lens, if it is anterior to the anterior vitreous phase, if there is a diffuse infiltrating retinoblastoma, presence of neovascular glaucoma, dense hemorrhage, phthisis bulbi, or aseptic orbital cellulitis, then all these cases qualify as a Group E tumor, and most of the times the treatment should be by enucleation. Multifocal retinoblastoma is also seen multiple tumors in the same eye, and most of these children are the ones that have a germline mutation. Now, imaging has already been covered beautifully by Dr. Usha, so I will not go into the details. B-scan ultrasound is the mainstay of imaging in RB, and this is the chart to show you how ultrasound can help to differentiate between the different causes of leukocoria depending upon the main echographic finding, the axial length of the eye, and the laterality of presentation. Just to give you an example, if you have a shorter eye, then it goes more in favor of a PHPV or an ROP. If if you have bilateral findings, they go more in favor of retinoblastoma or retinopathy of prematurity. PHPV can very rarely be bilateral. And of course, the main echographic finding or ultrasound gives away the diagnosis in the majority of cases. CT scan usually we don't do in retinoblastoma because of the risk of radiation-induced secondary cancers in children carrying germline mutation. It is only used for those cases where we're not able to document calcification on ultrasound, because CT has a higher sensitivity and specificity in picking up calcification than ultrasound in retinoblastoma. So MRI has again been very nicely covered by Dr. Usha, and I'll not go into the details, just to suffice here that it is a very, very handy imaging modality for staging of retinoblastoma, not to establish the diagnosis, but to stage for extraocular spread or optic nerve involvement or extrascleral extension. We sometimes have children who present with orbital cellulitis, and in these cases it becomes very difficult to know if it's inflammation or if there is swelling because of extraocular tumor spread. So in these cases also MRI is a very handy tool, because what we normally do in such cases is that when there is suspected inflammation, we give them a course of steroids for a week and then we repeat the MRI, and MRI is very useful in such a situation in differentiating this extraocular spread from just simple orbital invasion from orbital cellulitis. So that this is another important use of MRI in staging of extraocular retinoblastoma. And this is important because it completely changes the management. If we know it is not because of extraocular tumor spread, then we can simply do an enucleation. But if it is extraocular retinoblastoma, then it has to be managed by a much more aggressive multimodal treatment modality, including neoadjuvant chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and enucleation. So for extraocular retinoblastoma, we are following the Shantidas classification system, where the disease is classified from stage 0 to stage 4. Stage 3 are the patients with overt orbital spread, and stage 4 are those with metastatic disease, either hematogenous metastasis or CNS extension. Coming to the treatment goals of retinoblastoma, first and foremost is the survival of child, no doubt about that. This is followed by globe salvage. Try to save the vision in as many cases as possible, and if at all the child has to undergo enucleation, then we must ensure that the child gets the best possible cosmetic outcome. So the therapeutic options are many. No longer it is that you see a case of retinoblastoma and only enucleation comes to your mind. There are so many conservative treatment modalities that are available today. Local therapy in the form of cryotherapy, thermotherapy, then surgery is either in the form of enucleation. Exentration is now mainly reserved for chemo-resistant cases and usually not done. Chemotherapy has a huge role in the management of retinoblastoma, either in the form of primary neoadjuvant chemotherapy, which is when it is given before surgery, or adjuvant chemotherapy when it is given after enucleation. And radiotherapy again either can be in the form of plaque brachytherapy or in the form of external beam radiotherapy. So we try to save the globe in early intraocular tumors, and when it comes to group A tumors, focal therapy alone suffices and has a cure rate of almost 100%. In group B tumors and group D, C and D tumors, focal treatment has to be combined with systemic chemotherapy. But again, the globe salvage rates, they vary from 50% to 90% in tumors from group B to group D. So focal consolidation modalities are mainly in the form of transpupillary thermotherapy, which is given in the form of diode laser and usually used for tumors that are posterior to equator. If tumors are anterior to equator, then instead of TTT, we use cryotherapy using the triple freeze thaw technique. So TTT is administered under general anesthesia. We use a LIO, the large spot laser indirect ophthalmoscope mode of delivery. The laser is applied till there is a subtle whitening or light graying of the tumor, and 100% of the tumor area should be covered. Cryotherapy is applied by the technique of triple freeze and thaw. So this is a case where you can see small tumors, group A tumors to begin with. Actually, it is very difficult to pick up children at this stage, and this was the other eye of a child who underwent enucleation in one eye. So that is why we were able to pick up tumors at this early stage. And then you can see regressed flat scars following transpupillary thermotherapy. So This is another much larger tumor. It was a group B tumor, but again it responded with systemic chemotherapy. Now the picture that you see on the right side is actually a regression pattern of retinoblastoma, and judgment of regression can also be very challenging, and it needs years of experience and also knowledge about how to accurately judge regression, because it becomes a very difficult decision at times whether to continue with chemotherapy or whether to say that this tumor has completely regressed. This is another example that treated with cryotherapy. As you can see, the tumor was further away. Now, local drug delivery systems are being more and more used because of the concerns about toxic effects of systemic chemotherapy. So we have drugs that are being delivered through the periocular route, to the intraarterial route, and through now even it has been reported that through the intravitreal route also the drugs can be given. Now, intraarterial route is now gaining momentum in the West, and this is a technique which is super selective injection of the anti-cancer drug melphalan into the ophthalmic artery, and this is basically the advantage is that it avoids systemic exposure to the toxicity of chemotherapy. So I have a very short clipping over here, and I'll just show you the case of intraarterial melphalan that was done at AIIMS. So this is basically done by the interventional neuroradiologist, and the femoral artery is punctured. The catheter is introduced all the way into the ophthalmic artery. You can see over here the nice angiogram, and this is the ophthalmic artery. This is the ophthalmic carotid artery branches into the brain. So what is actually done is that in this femoral artery the catheter is introduced, and then microcatheters are introduced all the way up to the ophthalmic artery. Melphalan drug is injected in such a way that it goes into the ophthalmic artery, into the tumor, and into the eye. So this is called super selective injection of melphalan into the ophthalmic artery, and of course it's an expensive technique and requires the support of interventional radiology, but it is becoming very popular in the West as a globe salvage method for retinoblastoma. In our setup, enucleation is done in the majority of cases because these children come very late and there is no salvageable vision at that stage, and the risk of extraocular spread is extremely high. So we use the minimal manipulation technique, in which a long stump of optic nerve is usually preserved for histopathological analysis. We try to put a primary implanted in most of the cases wherever it is possible. Now, adjuvant chemotherapy is chemotherapy which is given after enucleation, so that is determined by histopathological examination of the enucleated globe. If there are high-risk histopathology features on pathology examination, which include tumor invasion to the anterior chamber, the iris, the ciliary body, massive choroidal invasion, post-laminar optic nerve invasion, or scleral invasion, then these children should be treated with adjuvant chemotherapy, which is 6 cycles of anti-cancer drugs. In such cases, enucleation is not the end of the story. These children are at risk factors to develop recurrences and systemic metastasis. So these are some pictures to show you in which cases adjuvant chemotherapy and radiotherapy was required. If the cut end of the optic nerve is showing tumor invasion, if there is extension of tumor beyond the sclera, or if there is a gross remnant of tumor after enucleation, then these children should be treated with adjuvant chemotherapy. Metastatic workup is done by the pediatric oncologist and includes a battery of investigations. Now, for extraocular retinoblastoma, we initially do an MRI, and then if the diagnosis is confirmed, then in those cases we treat them with upfront chemotherapy. If the tumor regresses after that, we do enucleation. If there is partial regression, we treat further with chemotherapy, and after regression we do an enucleation followed by radiotherapy. Only those cases which do not respond to chemotherapy are exenerated in this situation. This is an example of extraocular retinoblastoma. You can see with the multimodal treatment protocol, we have a satisfactory result. This is another child who came to us with extraocular retinoblastoma, and this is a 2-year follow-up showing child is wearing an artificial eye following enucleation. He's doing well. There is no systemic metastasis. Metastatic retinoblastoma is a challenge in our country, and I'm afraid most of these children, they do not survive. Post-treatment assessment and follow-up is extremely important in retinoblastoma because we're always on the lookout for new tumors or edge recurrences, metastatic disease, and late effects of treatment that include both bony hypoplasia of the midface or orbit, radiation cataract, and secondary malignant neoplasms. So we have a national retinoblastoma registry in place in the country, and there are about 9 sites that are participating from India, including Guwahati, PGI Chandigarh, Hyderabad, and Lucknow, and AIIMS is also one of the centers. The study was started in 2009. We have seen about 600 new cases from our center alone. Genetic counseling is also a very important aspect of retinoblastoma because the parents want to know what are the chances of the next child having a tumor. So if the family history is positive, the sibling and the offspring have a 40% chance. If family history is negative, I'll just take a minute. If the family history is negative, it depends on the laterality. In bilateral cases, the offspring has a 40% chance. In unilateral cases, it's an 8% chance of developing a retinoblastoma. So what not to do in retinoblastoma? Just a couple of cases here to show you how retinoblastoma can be mismanaged, misdiagnosed, and what happens. A 4-year-old girl who presented with proptosis to us had undergone an evisceration 3 weeks ago. She had a prior history of leukocoria that was ignored. CT and MRI showed overt orbital spread of the tumor. This child was treated with multimodal treatment protocol. Retinoblastoma had been misdiagnosed in her case. This was another case who presented to us, 1-year-old boy who had undergone a trabeculectomy in the left eye elsewhere and then came to us. We put the red cam on the right eye and found multifocal tumors. Immediately we knew it was a case of retinoblastoma misdiagnosed. Perhaps the child had presented with ophthalmos, and without seeing the other eye, somebody went ahead with a trabeculectomy. So we did imaging, ruled out extraocular spread, did an enucleation, and found there was tumor infiltration into the anterior chamber, the iris, and ciliary body. Another case, 3-year-old boy with history of evisceration, prior history of leukocoria. You can see the implant over here had been put at the time of enucleation, but within 2 weeks there was massive orbital spread and the child presented to us. So misdiagnosis of retinoblastoma does occur, and in some cases it can be avoided, some cases it cannot. For example, this is a case of astrocytic hematoma that was enucleated at our center because we could not rule out retinoblastoma by clinical examination and by any sort of imaging. Luckily, the patient had a painful blind eye and the VR was extinguished. There was no vision, and astrocytic hematoma can also be a very aggressive tumor at times. It can grow rapidly, and therefore enucleation was justified. So majority of cases misdiagnosis can be prevented, but there can be an occasional histopathological surprise, and the ophthalmologist has to be prepared for that. We have a long way to go in our country especially, but as Swami Vivekananda has said, arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is achieved. Thank you for your kind attention.